Hello and welcome back to JLXP. We got Phreak back in the house. It's our 2-week checkpoint where we have to speak to Phreak. And it's interesting because there were only 2 series this weekend in North America. The first one was cast by Gabby, and then the one today was cast by Flowers. I haven't really seen you in a while.
That's true.
So we have a lot to catch up on.
We did have a meeting on Wednesday, though. So we saw each other in person pretty recently.
True.
But I haven't cast in over a week now.
I'm used to seeing you like on the weekend.
Yeah,
That's
true.
the point. But how was
How
was watching the LCS? I had my experience watching the LCS for a while last year in the summer.
Right.
But just this weekend, like how was it as a viewer? What stood out?
It was fun. I mean, it was fun, like watching a actually relatively close series in the fact that like FlyQuest, did something against EG, which is cool to see.
Yeah.
I was just like sitting there, like kind of more by myself, like, ooh, is it? No, okay, Golden Guardians didn't get anything done, but it was like, cool to see them like try whatnot. So it was. I didn't have anyone to like bounce stuff off of. Where it's like, I can't yell and have Kobe or you or someone else like, either in cast or just in the green room, whatever, like talk to me about, oh, here's where you're wrong, or I agree, whatever.
Yeah, I'm gonna go through the weekend in chronological order. I think that's what we're doing. So we're gonna start with Saturday, where I got to host again because Dash was attending a wedding. I was pulling for Golden Guardians. We had a triple analyst C9 prediction, so I threw in Golden Guardians 3-2 because I thought Cloud9 was possibly going to be shaky, and I thought that they needed to show that they could actually win through someone that wasn't Summit. And I wasn't actually sure what Golden Guardians was going to try. I thought either they were going to actually just counterpick with Licorice and go that route where he's just going to go head-to-head against Summit, and they think he's good enough to at least, either go even or beat him a couple times, and then the team will win the other ones. But it looked to me like they tried to lift as much as they could out of the 100 Thieves strategy of let's just tank top and then pick scaling and win. But then they also had that with Nocturne all 3 games, and like Nocturne doesn't work that well in front-to-back team comps where they're just like diving with their Ornn. So that was a weird series to me. It ended up being a quick C9 3-0. But before I give my thoughts on like what surprised you about the series, I want to hear that.
Sure. So I think there were some really nice moments. Like I liked Nocturne just like one-shotting the Gangplank 2 or 3 times across that series. Like that works pretty well like early on. So I played a lot of Nocturne
because it was picked 3 times.
Yeah. So I played 100 solo games of Nocturne last season. Like he's like a champion that I am like intimately familiar with. And he's really fun. He's good in situations where you can keep the game more split up because like he just will duel the enemy AD carry, and if you have any help at all, okay, he won't duel, but like he'll finish the kill in the enemy mid laner. So if someone's off in a side lane, like give him any help and he'll kill that person. And you kind of play, and that's like Pride Stalker's play style as well, is like I'm one of the carries, he's really farm oriented, like Nocturne fits that if they can keep the game more split up. And we saw again the level 6 dives on the Gangplank that worked pretty well. But yeah, if they're like, oh, they already got to the dragon, or like they got to second herald, guess we'll fight second herald. And yeah, Nocturne's not a great team fighter. Like of all junglers, he's not a good team fighter, right? Like he is a diver, and you either want to dive buddy, which like Ornn ult is like a better version of Gangplank ult, where like it hits the back line and it helps. Or like you actually want an Ahri diving in there as well, or you have a Renata Glass like revive this idiot or whatever. Like you want something else going on there, or you're really pegging yourself as like, yes, we're gonna win the first 12 minutes really really because don't worry, we'll pick you off in rotation so that when your mid laner comes down to join Dragon, we just catch you in like the mid brush by river, right? Like it's really really active, and you fall off a cliff. Unless you have split push pressure and he shadows those lanes. And yeah, Golden Guardians didn't do that. They had some gold leads, right? Like they did. Like the first 2 minutes were good.
Yeah, and so a quick tangent on the Nocturne thing. He's not seeming at that point now, but that might just be because champions like Rel aren't as good. Because like to me, when Nocturne was really broken, and maybe this was last year with you, was when you could do Nocturne Rel. But specifically, like the triple combo was Nocturne Rel Orianna.
Sure, yeah.
Or even
he's a good delivery system.
Yeah, or literally even Nocturne Rel Annie, like some mid laner that has a really rapid AoE burst, because the the things you talked about Nocturne is like, oh, if you can spread the game out, he's good because he'll kill people in side lanes, which is always true. But then if you come together, he was, to me, actually just broken last year, because if you came together and then when the lights go out, people's natural instinct is to shrink because they want to find their teammate.
I see.
So then you hit them with Orianna Rel and you just you just win the game, right? Because you can't split up.
He's coaxing you into bad positioning, right?
Yeah, exactly. You can't split up, you can't group up, so you lose. Like it was so potent back then.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, certainly if you can all time it right, like if I mean, I think Nocturne works like when you're ahead and your team is ahead, whatever, right? Because like, okay, well now we get the vision advantage, so like either walk at us and we have vision advantage, or like run away and we get the dragon. But like, yeah, he doesn't do much. Like he's kind of like Jinx, where he doesn't do much if you're not already ahead. Like Jinx needs that first reset to like be as good as other AD carries in like game team fights, and Nocturne like needs that dive to matter for like anything to happen. Otherwise, he's like a not tanky bruiser with a stride breaker and a guardian angel, or like Pokemon's a guardian angel, and it's like, I mean, that's not Xin Zhao, right? That's not, Lee Sin kicking and getting out, right? Like he doesn't have any of those things that other fighters can have. And yeah, in the very specific window where you're already in a range of like a Flash Annie and Nocturne dives in, like that's a very specific thing.
It is.
But yeah, I mean, I trust that you're right and that you saw it in scrims and whatnot, and that's how it kind of played out. But
we came back from an 8,000 gold deficit against TSM with Nocturne Annie Rel.
Because they just grouped up.
In
they just decided to not position well against Annie and just killed themselves.
And that was exactly a repeat game of a scrim we had against like 100 Thieves Academy, and where they were also up like 7,000 gold against us. But then we won that with Nocturne Annie Rel as well. But more generally about the series, to touch on some things, I was generally disappointed in the way Golden Guardians played.
Me too.
It definitely felt like they threw in the towel a little bit. Not because they picked Nocturne the third time, but just I don't know, man. That team had so much spark in so many games, and I'm using very general terms, but in like playing aggressively and actually displaying good teamwork and making big plays. But it felt like almost every single fight against Cloud9, they were like either nervous or overpressing. Ablaze Olive got picked off a bunch of times. I guess I am disappointed that they didn't give Licorice a go button kind of the whole series. They were just always telling him to play back foot against Summit. And then when Olive is getting caught out of position and Berserker and Isles are just sticking together in lane, there just weren't places for them to make plays. And they lost every objective fight. That's my ramblings have kind of turned to this. Their objective setup was really poor. And they were just starting, they were literally just starting objectives and hoping things would work out is what it felt like, which is just hugely disappointing for a team that has been developing for so long and has such a large coaching staff, that they didn't look organized around objectives. That is the biggest thing that stood out to me and why I'm disappointed in them.
Yeah, I'd be really curious, like what their week or 2 weeks of scrims looked like. I mean, maybe they had assumed they're going to face 100 Thieves, maybe not, I don't know. But like, it wasn't like the bracket was going to flip, right? It was C9 or 100. And then, they had a full week to know, okay, it's definitely C9 and watch those games and whatnot. So I can understand, like, I'll break it apart a little bit, I guess. Like, I can understand them saying like, hey, the way we're going to win is going to be X. Like, Licorice, I'm sorry, like, you're never going to outlane Summit. And they had like that Gwen versus Ornn game where he forced the early recall on wave 3. And he bought refillable, and then, he got to walk back. And, unfortunately there, like, Licorice, because he got forced to do a late recall because of the late invade, he had to, like, ghost to lane, and then he couldn't auto-attack the first 3 melees because he was saving his Q to harass the Ornn. Yeah. And, like, it's all very specific stuff. It's like, okay, he's down 60 gold, he shouldn't be. He's down a summoner, he shouldn't be. He's still forced an early recall, which, like, he then TP back on the cannon wave to catch it. But, like, okay, at least for a bit he can fight. And then like when they were doing the Ornn Nocturne stuff, he was setting up kills, like at least things were happening. But you're right, like their entire setup around objectives, the fact that like they're just like, oh, we're down gold, let's fight for second Herald. It's like, why? Like how are we still in a world where teams are not I'll bounce to a different point as well in a second. Okay. That's similar. It's like, how are teams not in a spot where they realize like, oh, we're not expected to win? Right? Like, okay, so we either lose nothing, gain something cross map, and give up half a turret because of Herald Charge, or we like 70-30 lose a team fight and gain nothing and lose half a turret and still losing the Herald. It's like how are people still in this like day and age of like it's a 12-year-old game, you're professional players. How do players still not realize like how has this not been like ingrained into their heads that like
Yeah.
some fights are bad. Like give up sooner, go cross map sooner. Like we have an entire season of like Danny or FBI being left on an island in the bot lane, like taking 3 turret plates, and the team takes Herald, and it's like, look, do you watch games ever? Like it's wild to me that like teams still get this wrong so horribly when like I couldn't tell you every single one that's happened. But I know that I've seen way too many teams show up late to a Herald, watch it die, and then go back to mid lane. Or like show up, see a dragon die, and walk back to mid lane. And it's like you could have just taken mid lane and maybe even tier 2, and then actual play would be positive for you.
Yeah,
they didn't respect the wave.
I'll devil's advocate this a little bit.
Okay.
It looks a lot worse from spectator than it does from fog. Would be the way I'd answer why do teams show up, because you're specifically saying like why are teams late contesting objectives when they could have just taken an objective, or are you saying why are teams forcing objectives when they don't have the right setup? Which one should I dive into first?
Right. So it's you're the losing team, and you credibly believe the other team is gonna play this objective, right? Okay. So like it's either like I'm losing team, I'm showing. I mean, it's really both to me.
Yeah.
It's like I'm losing team, I'm showing up late. Just don't even bother. Like for me, and I'll go on my tangent, is like I'll play Flexi with friends or Clash with friends, and we're like low diamond average, right? Yeah. Like but whatever. And it's like okay, Dragons in a minute. I'm like I will ping like. Go fucking top lane. We're shoving that wave in. We're taking top lane tier 1 for Dragon.
Yeah.
And I will tell my random Diamond 4 friends, like, we're gonna go take top outer. Everyone move up here, like, get out of bot lane. Like, AD carry can go take the mid wave, and then we're all gonna go ward the top jungle. We're gonna ward their red buff. We're just gonna get up there and like, hey, if they screw up, we're getting top tier 2 as well. Great. Yep. But like, I'm just telling everyone, like, here, everyone just go to this side of the map. Let's go. Yep. And like, I'm just some idiot, right? Like, how are pro teams not even like aware that they're losing and should be doing something else?
Yeah. Well, for one, it sounds like the things you have is like a unified voice, and then people that are willing to sacrifice their own waves to go for things. So that's like already like better than like the majority of league teams. But secondly, I would say that we'll do other team is going to set up a dragon, so therefore we should cross map first. It is very hard to actually track where the other team is. Would be what I'd say. Even in pro comms, like a lot of times you don't know for sure if the team is going for dragon until you hear it die. So by that point, if you try and move top lane, maybe that's too late. And then also, if your AD carry is still in bot lane and you've shown 3 people top lane on a ward, those 3 guys that just killed dragon are diving your AD carry, so to speak. But like, just the timings can get really messy. And then the one that is, I understand why it happens, but I still really hate, is the we're behind, so let's run to an objective. And just because the bet there is that the other team is going to try and contest undermanned. Right? Mm-hmm. So that you're just going to like get a 5v4 because someone's there and they're just like, oh, we're ahead. We're going to try and stop you. But I also made some rules about this because I like, and I actually think like Clash teams could follow this. And maybe if you play like FlexQ with friends, about like what you need to do if you're starting an objective, specifically dragon setups. This will depend a little bit on the meta as well. And I have it written down somewhere else. So I'm going to try and do this from memory. This is not all the rules. You must have a pushing lane. So you need to, are we taking it through mid? Are we pushing mid or are we pushing bot? A couple years ago, like in 2020, Dom1 actually usually did it through bot, which everyone had been talking about mid prior for like years, and then Dom1 was just doing it through bot. But here's the thing: if you were starting dragon without a wave pushed and without a clear willingness to turn and fight when a team enters your zone, you're losing 8 to 9 times out of 10. So what that means is like the pixel bush or like the banana bush, you should have your pink there, and you should be positioned such while you're taking the dragon that if they step there, you're all ready to go. Because if you're in the dragon pit and a team is just able to collapse in around you, you're like, I've seen so many fights where you're just screwed. And what it looked like to me, like Golden Guardians did, is they were starting the objectives and did not have a clear plan of which spot they were going to fight on. And that could be from miscommunication. That could be from Ole just being inconsistent on when he wants to try and fight, right? Like he might not have enough patience, or he might be too aggressive, or Pride Stalker might be too stubbornly trying to finish the dragon, or they have mixed comms. But yeah, really disappointing. Not necessarily an excuse, but that's just kind of why I think those things happen. Because in the moment it is hard, and if you're not simplifying down to like rules frequently, I think all your instincts can go out of whack.
Yeah. I have one personal anecdote for this actually, which is winning Riot Rumble back in like 2015 or something. And my jungler was Zyrene, and he was like a Diamond 2 jungler in like 2015ish. Like, it was pretty good. It was like a D280 carry back then. And I remember like there were two games that stood out to me. One where like we're doing a dragon or something, and you just randomly flash engages. We're like, oh, I thought we were dragoning. And so I like yelled at him after the game, like, bro, like, I don't mind the call to turn, but you got to tell me you want to turn, okay? Like, just like next game, like, please tell me you want to turn, and then like I'll follow you, but like I need to know because I'm like burning cooldowns on dragon right now. And the next game, like, we're doing a dragon, whatever, and he's like, okay, as soon as someone walks up to here, I'm flash ulting them on Sejuani. I'm like, okay, and then we just like crush the team fight, right? Yep. And yeah, rules are not, and I think that's actually smart, by the way. Like, the rules are really good and get people on the same page so that they know what to look for, because everyone's got their own understanding of the game and, you know, what they look for. But as soon as I, like, you know, too aggressively told him, like, look, just tell me when you want to do this, and we'll be there for you. And the next game, he just tells, okay, when they go here, I'm going, and we're looking for it. And then like clockwork, he flashes forward, and we're like, then we've all turned. It's great. So yeah, I mean, those kind of communications, just like, it's so easy to like talk about, like, oh, just say when you want to go, forehead, but just like you just get results if you get people to get on like a very basic level of playing together. Speaking
of basics, and this will be the last, I think we talk about this before we move on to the next series. I'm going to talk about golf, actually.
Great.
So this happens a lot in a lot of professional sports, like League of Legends, where because you're so worried about details or high performance that you forget very basic things. So a lot of the very best golfers in the world, if they're struggling, will literally go back to the driving range and like check their stance. Like, are my feet the right distance from the ball? Is the club in the right space in my stance for where it is? Is my grip, is my hand too over the top? Is it too underneath?
Right.
Like, it needs to be just normal. You'd think that would be a basic thing that these guys are never checking, but they actually have to check it all the time. So with League even, going back to very basic things more frequently than you would think is needed can be very helpful.
Yeah.
And that's just with all sports, I think, actually.
Yeah. I think that's something that I actually thought about a little bit recently, which is the idea of just like, and maybe this is just like people getting smart about the game as a whole, and so it just sounds obvious in retrospect, but like, I mean, think about, I don't know if anyone's like, if you play Flex with your friends at home, anyone, or anyone's playing Clash, whatever, and like people are like, okay, like we're gonna really drill down like getting this draft appropriate, right? Like, think about how much time like even pro teams spend on draft prep, and it's like, well, just imagine you were just better, and I don't want to sound that stupid, but like, how many like big fundamentals could you have just improved upon
in those
and it's
like hour and a half?
Right. And I guess the thought is like, okay, like, hey, what's a normal CS at 10 mark for players today compared to players in 2013? And like, how hard is that really to be better at last hitting? And like, maybe actually quite, I don't know, but like, you know, we have all these discussions around like optimized items and optimized runes and ooh, you know, counter pick and make sure you man the right champions. And it's like, you could give like any team comp in the world a T1 and they'll just like play League better than you.
Yeah.
And like all the specifics don't matter. And I do wonder, like, at all levels of play, really, at all levels of play, like, how much time is spent on, like, slightly improving specifics when just, like, getting overall better is just, like, and I don't know how you just get overall better, right?
Exactly.
But, like,
no, that's an interesting concept. Like, what if, and this is, like, what practice tool theoretically would be for, but, like, if there was better ways to practice your free throws or your three-pointers or dribbling drills, right? Like those types of things, which is literally just, let's take these 6 junglers, let's get perfect jungle clears. On average, it'll make us 3 seconds faster. Let's crash a bunch of waves into turret. Let's practice, like, let's throw a couple Jinx rockets at the wave to make the health all weird. let's just practice. Like, all right, how many can I get when this 12 minion wave hits? Can I get 10, 11? Doing that over and over again means when you get to 20 minutes, you're going to have maybe 200 to 300 more gold, right? 100 gold a person, 5 like that. That could actually make a difference. So that's interesting. Not many people are doing that, but it would be like a fun thing to experiment with, I think.
Yeah.
Because a player like Chovy is like the best CSer in the world, and he probably didn't like actively practice it. But I do wonder, like, if one person, some like psycho, just spent 3 hours a day in practice tool, last hitting with like no items and no AD runes, if he would be able to CS as well. There's obviously like harass and stuff that goes in, but I imagine like the raw mechanic of timing your last hits, you could probably get just as good as Chovy, but it's no one can actually dedicate like 100 hours to the raw mechanics of last hitting. The same way that like I think there's a lot of people that could shoot like 95% from the free throw line, yet no NBA players shoot 95% from the free throw line. At a certain point, the amount of practice you put in doesn't count and like doesn't matter.
Yeah. You always get measuring returns.
Yeah, it's interesting. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I talked myself into another tangent. People flamed. So here's a weird one. People flame LeBron James's free throw shooting like crazy. They used to, at least.
Okay.
But how much does it really matter?
Okay. How many points a game does LeBron give up?
How many points per game is he losing? So,
because that's a relatively fair metric, right? How many points per game does LeBron lose by having a lower free point percentage? I'm going to guess it's like 3 points per game.
I'm glad that's where your brain went. So, let's go to the 2018 season. That was his worst free throw percentage. He shot 66.5% from the free throw line.
Okay.
He shot like 58% from the field. So that's like a terrible free throw percentage. Like the majority of NBA players shoot better than this. So he's missing a third of his free throws, right?
Yeah.
But he shot 7.6 free throws per game and made 5 of them. So on average, he's missing 2.5 free throws a game. If he shot free throws like at an elite level, like let's say 85%, it's less than it gets 1 point a game, basically.
Yeah.
So in the grand scheme of things,
how many free throws he shot? But I was guessing 3, and it was actually less.
Yeah, exactly. So in the grand scheme of things, like all the different things he trains, like sure, he could actually score 1 more point a game from free throws, but that doesn't matter, right? It does. Like it matters a little bit, but other things can definitely matter more.
It's non-zero.
Yeah,
of course.
All right.
Yeah,
thanks for that.
I think that's really relevant, right? Because 1 point a game is 1 point a game. Like there's not much more you can say about that. Like that's a really sort of self-sufficient, self-contained metric. And yeah, I mean ultimately you're optimizing. Like okay, how can we get LeBron to score 2 points, or 1 point a game more? It's like, well, I can get my free throws up to elite level. Yeah. Or what else will get me 1 more point a game?
Train this other skill. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I block 1 more shot a game. Well, that blocks 2 more points a game. Yeah. So guess what? That's actually worth more, right? Like if you can get 1 more block a game, that's better than improving your free throw percentage from ass to elite.
Yep. 3-point percentage.
Okay.
Way more
I don't know if that's harder, right? But like, right. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, totally your point. I agree. And that's kind of the fun thing. I don't want to take this a long time, this segue.
Okay.
But because I haven't finished my thoughts on it, but part of the reason I flame things like Void Staff and Lord Dominic's Regard's second item is like in very specific situations, they in fact deal more damage than the opposition, and that's true. Yeah. But they also don't do all the other things that the other items do. Like, your wave clear being better, your cooldowns being shorter, your survivability being higher. Like those also all matter in the point of like, how do you get 1 point a game? It's like, how do you win 1 more team fight? Yeah. And occasionally it's the other things and not just the raw DPS. Anyway, there's a whole thing about that, but like, it's along those lines.
That requires diving deeper. Like how do you grok what better CDR is or what? All these things are. The thing that stood out to me in the EG game today, EG FlyQuest. It was 3-1, relatively one-sided. Impact's Gwen. The way he team fought with it, to me, was just different than the way other people play Gwen. And I could go, like, I might go back and try and pull specific things. Obviously, a lot of people like do a bunch of damage on Gwen and are very good split pushers. And I don't think Impact is like the most amazing laning Gwen or carried in a huge way. But on other champions, his ability to space a team fight and be a frontliner who just takes all your attention is great. And he literally played Gwen that way. Like, his
Yeah.
items are AP carry items, but his impact on a fight was frontline space creator. And comparing, say, Licorice's Gwen or even Kumo's Gwen and just the way they approach team fights, I feel like the approach was actually completely different. The approach of, I think, most Gwens is, I need to find a way onto the back line so I can, like, threaten and kill the carries. And Impact was literally just like, no, I'm just going to create a ton of space. Right. And then we'll win. And that's kind of what happened, which was really cool.
Yeah, I think that's smart. I mean, I think it'll come down in every given case. Like, I mean, notice she can kind of do both things. Like, she's a strong champion. It's going to come down to the team comp you're in. I think she usually, unless a head doesn't have enough damage to solo kill an AD carry, like, she doesn't have Zed damage windows, right? Like, she's not Talon, she's not Kiana. Like, you can go fight the AD carry, have them, like, trade back against you, have them get pushed out, and then when your W ends, you Zonias, and the AD carry is at 20%, there's no threat anymore, and you're like, well, what did I do? I traded a health bar for one that's not going to end, and mine I have to flash or I'm dead, and it's probably I have Ghost, so I'm probably just dead. And hopefully, okay, I CC'd the AD carry for my, my 6 seconds, my 8 seconds, whatever. Was I have to win the fight? Maybe that's true, right? But, like, so is playing Malphite and pressing R to the back line and being like, well, I'm going to buy 8 seconds, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
With other things you can do as a Malphite. So yeah, I like the idea of kind of zoning even more people out of it. I mean, this is why she has the W that she does, right? Is she's meant to be able to team fight. Like, it's why that ability is so absurd. It's because being a light fighter is really tough in League of Legends. And it turns out the only fighters people actually play in competitive play are Gwen is immune and Sinja ult, who's also immune. And it's like, we have Olaf who falls off a cliff. We have Nocturne who falls off a cliff. We have Lee Sin who falls off a cliff, but he can kick Flash or AD carry in and then fall off a cliff, right? Like, what are the fighters people play who aren't just invincible with Gordrix and Sterix gauges, right? Like, those are dead now, right? No one plays those, right? There aren't really top lane fighters much right now. It's, Jace is a poke mage, Ornn is a tank, Malphite's a tank, Renekton is getting memed on because he's been nerfed 17 times to find he's not invincible anymore, and Sterix is dead. Like, turns out it's hard to play fighters in League of Legends without some kind of really, really good tool that makes you a good fighter, right? Like, Camille, I guess, kind of, but even then she's rare, right? And it's because you usually want a second diver so you can one-shot the top lane.
And Camille's almost a little bit more of an assassin in a sense. Like,
I still call her diver.
Yeah,
like, diver is like the
diver.
call.
She's definitely diver.
Yeah. But yeah, like, generally speaking, you need a second diver for a diver to do their job correctly. Unless you're playing split up. It's like, well, I locked someone down and the team is there. So, the 3v1 gank were my dive buddies. But yeah, like, divers in general can't solo anything. That's just, like, not how they work. Like, that's just not where their damage is tuned, which is fine, but it means that you don't get to play backline Gwen unless someone else is there, so you should play frontline Gwen and have easy ways out and just kind of front to frontline.
Something else I want to track, because I saw Impact, I felt like did this more than other Gwens, is standing at the farthest edge of his immune zone, right? Like, rather than being kind of inside, he was, like, right at the corner all the time.
Good.
And I just thought he did that more than other people. So I'm gonna track that just to check. Danny as well. He played really well.
Yeah.
He played really, really well. And I think looking forward a little bit to their, like, C9 series that they're gonna have to play next week. That's gonna be super, super important. Is if Danny Vulcan can outperform Berserker Isles, which, like, we're 99% sure is gonna stay Berserker Isles and not go back to Winsome.
Yeah.
Because I think, generally speaking, it is pretty hard to carry through top against Impact. And I think Cloud9 as a whole did win their last series without playing through Summit. So I think they're going to kind of continue to do that. But yeah, a lot of it I think is going to come down to which AD carry can get ahead. Because Berserker is so insanely good, and I actually think Danny he has become extremely underrated. Because I think most people would have had him as, like, the 4th best AD carry in the league, because you're going to have.
I put him 3rd for me.
Who'd you put him ahead of?
Go ahead.
Because there's Hans, FBI, and Berserker.
Oh, I put him ahead of FBI. I'm pretty sure. I mean, I could go back and look, and maybe it was actually he wasn't there. Like those are close, to be fair, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's a clear top 4, and then I think there's a valley.
Yeah.
Because maybe I actually had him 4th. You're right.
Because the way I was looking at it is there were, for most of the year, it had been like this clear top 3, at least to me, because FBI is like the defending champion, even though he slumped a little bit. But I'm willing. Maybe these are famous last words if he just gets bopped by Berserker. But, like, I'm willing to put Danny as, like, oh yeah, he is just there. Like, he is just in that top 4 now, rather than there being these, like, 3 elite guys and then Danny and then the rest.
Oh, interesting. Okay,
Like,
that's interesting. Yeah,
I'm kind of ready to
my
say
view
there's 4 elite guys.
Okay, got it. Cool. Yeah. I mean, I'm in that boat already.
Oh,
So
wow.
like,
Okay.
welcome to the boat.
Cool take.
Now, I will say that like, I guess I will say that like, I think Berserker and Hans are up here.
Yeah.
And then there's like FBI and Danny, and then there's the rest of the LCS.
Okay.
So like, there's an S and an A, and then like C or something.
Yeah.
But like, there was a clear top 4 and a cutoff. I don't know if I say all the top 4 are in that same bundle. I don't hate the idea. I think if you're like, oh no, they're all within 5% of each other, I think that's respectable.
What would FBI have to do to get into your top 2? Like because with that gap, because I think that's just where we might disagree the most. Because for me, he had a bit of an off split, but when I think about the way he just like is always in the right spot in team fights, he does that like almost more than Berserker even if his
you might be
fingers
right.
aren't as crazy.
I mean, I think that matters though, right? Like, I think your decisions and your hands, is like the sum of who you are as a player, basically, right? And I just seen more of like these, none of these players are players who just outright kill themselves for no reason.
Yeah.
I would say, they're all players. Like, I think Hans is the best positioning of anyone by far. Hans just like doesn't get hit by stuff. Like, he's thinking so many steps ahead that like when people, so like my example is like, when people are flashing to dodge a Malphite ult or Hecarim ult, he's already walked out of the AoE, and his mid lane's flashing, but he's already gone.
Right.
Because he knows it's coming. Like, that's something I see Hans do that no one else does. We're just like, the engage comes in, and I'm always expecting a bunch of flashes, but he's like already over the wall. Like, he's already backed off. And so that's one thing that's unique to him, where his defense positioning is better than anyone in the LCS. And he's still obviously a very good laner, and he's a very good team fighter and all those, but like, that's where he's a 10 out of 10, and then everybody else is like an 8 or a 9. For Berserker, his choices of going in and his hands, those are both at 10s. Like the really premier 80 carries, double back when he was in top 4, and Berserker right now, Uzi in his prime, right? These are players who would like, oh, I just go in now because it's gonna work, and I'm gonna get those last 4 kills. Like, that is hard to get, and that's easy to get wrong. And there's all the wild turtle memes and the Cody Sun memes from those, right? When they're wrong, they look really, really stupid. When they look really good, and Danny's here as well. Danny's like a 9.5 on this one. That's to me like such a big sell. This is okay, you're there, right? And I guess the reason I'm not completely sold the Berserker is the best is because he was straddled with Winsome for so long. I don't know if his landing is good or if it's Winsome's fault.
Okay.
Or like if it's his landing is bad as Winsome's fault, right? Like he could just be a good team fighter, or it could be that he's finally going to be unlocked, now that he's got Isles here. Because like, hey, look, Ole and Lost is not a real test. I'm sorry, right? Like, okay, up against Danny and Vulcan. Okay, cool. Like, show me this lane. So that's why I'm not like 100% on him. And then, I mean, that's kind of like my explanation of AD carry power rankings.
Yeah, I think you explained it well. I don't have big disagreements. I think the only thing that I would push back on a little bit is I would say that FBI and Hans approach team fights in an extremely similar way, rather than Hans being like a level above FBI in that sense. So I see those two as actually like very, very similar players. And then I would say Danny and Berserker are also more similar. Like if you're trying to,
I agree with that.
If you're trying to bucket them, that's kind of the like super, almost slightly more conservative, but still extremely high damage players. And then
10 and 9 versus 10 and 9, like on these skills.
Yeah, maybe it's like 9.5 and 10. Like they're all
or whatever.
They all just seem really elite to me from an AD carry perspective.
They are really elite.
Yeah,
they are really elite.
Okay, I think that's it for LCS playoffs this week. Unless there's something else you want to touch on.
No, I think that covered everything pretty well. I mean, EG Fly was interesting in game 2, but whatever.
Yeah, it happens. Well, Fly's coming back next split. They surprise people.
That's true.
G2, I think, is what the majority of people talk about, and we normally don't talk about LEC on this podcast, but we'll talk a little bit about G2 and then a little bit about like the globe in general, because LCS playoffs are heating up in the sense that we have our top 4 now, and our finals will happen in 2 weeks. But the G2 finals were today, and I got a little bit maybe a little bit jealous that their like biggest team had this amazing miracle run, because it's just so cool for fans when that can happen. And what is like Caps as a player, and I'm not going to go like super specific on this because it's a 12-game win streak they went on after they knocked down in the lowest bracket. They 3-0'd Vitality, where Caps took down Perks, right? They 3-0'd Misfits, where they beat the MVP, right? They 3-0'd Fnatic, where Humanoid just looked bad, and then they 3-0'd today. So a crazy run. I think half of it was Caps playing at like an extremely high level, and then for like Humanoid, something was definitely like off and broken with Fnatic. They actually ended the season on a 6-game losing streak, which is crazy. But what I wanted to talk about here is not any like deep analysis, but the concept of fans and what that can do to a player like Caps.
Yeah.
Okay, so everyone has experienced this moment when playing games. Like anyone who's into games, they'll get to like a big moment, and because they haven't been there before, they'll be like a little bit nervous, and you can get that feeling. Like I haven't actually had this feeling in gaming for a long time, but you get that feeling where you're just like really amped and want to perform well, and that's almost like too much adrenaline, and you'll fail. But I think what happens to a player like Caps, and this is kind of my working theory, is he's so good and has been so good and hasn't really been challenged. He hasn't been the same player since fans went away. Like for almost 2 years. But here's podcast listeners can do this without the hands, but there's
Jeff's holding his hand up for those watching.
I'm holding my hand up
listening
to the
in audio
camera.
only.
There's no energy where you're just going to be sloppy and lazy, and then there's like too much energy. And then the sweet spot's like right here. I don't think the sweet spot's like
close
in the middle.
High energy.
Yeah. The sweet spot's very close to the high energy where you don't want to overcap. Yeah. And I just don't feel like Caps had ways of recruiting that energy without fans. But like when he did recruit that energy, he like reached back into being the super elite mid laner again. And I think that's a big reason they made this run.
Sure. That's certainly possible. I'm gonna devil's advocate without actually really necessarily meaning my side.
Got it.
Which is about the time Caps got really good again is the exact same time that 100 Thieves stopped being garbage, right? Like at about the same date, right? In the same week, Caps is like, I'm gonna take over and we're gonna go like 12-0 or whatever. 100 Thieves in a very similar boat just started taking names.
So what's
from about the same
what's
week
the parallel?
Well, the parallel is simply that like, well, the season's been on for about 3 months, and the slump is over, and like I'm going to gear up in time for the end of the season. You know, MSI's at May, like let's get there. Now, obviously, it's also possible that it was actually crowd buff. Like that's of course reasonable. But like, right, nothing happened to make 100 Thieves suddenly stop slumping. They just started working harder. This is what we heard from Papa Smithy talking about. People having kind of long schedules and keep pushing, and then finally, okay, like. Yeah, we were taking some time off. Now we're going to go back into it and start working harder. And like, it could be that like, well, we lost to Fnatic 3-1. We should try playing better, like, and then going from there. And yeah, I mean, G2 Vitality, that's just really close. Caps was the difference maker there. Like, he stole a dragon as Ahri without smite. Like, that's just, and so it is funny how much of the 12-0 run is like, well, it's because
held up as this 12-0 thing. Where it's like, if you do this run, like the players play exactly the same, but just like the coin flipping goes differently. It's like, it's a 12-3 run.
Which is still very good.
Could easily have happened, but it's still really good. Yeah. No, I hear you. I definitely think it would be a combination of those things. I don't want it to come across like, oh yeah, by the way, he was in front of fans, so now he can play 2 solo queue games a day and be the best ever.
Of course.
It's just finding motivation and energy that comes from the universe. And for Caps, I'll go back and double check it later, but like I really do think he wasn't Caps without fans, and he's Caps.
That's probably true.
Yeah,
that's probably true.
So
I buy that. I absolutely buy that.
And let's hope there's fans at MSI because he's going.
Yeah.
Speaking of undefeated runs,
who else choking in front of fans, right?
Faker
like,
all the
you
time.
get the other side too.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, well, right before I jumped to MSI, but like, right? Who was anyone who choked because now we're not just online only or not just empty studio only, right? Like, he went up and who went down, right?
Yeah.
Like maybe it is 12-3. If the fans, like if some people aren't over two.
Humanoid definitely went down.
Right.
That's an interesting one to think about because his
G2
rise,
the run,
Humanoid's rise has mostly been during COVID. Yeah. He went to Worlds and was a really good player on Splice back in 2019. And then also, like, there were no fans at Worlds 2020, and Matt also played like garbage. So, like, it's not like, but it's fans are an element of this. The other element is just like the charge you can get before going on stage and like just how it feels. And sometimes you get that from just knowing there are bigger stakes or knowing who you're playing against. And sometimes you're getting that just because there's like a different people watching. Everyone's going to be a little bit different, but the overall concept of like finding that sweet spot of adrenaline is an art form that's, that you just can't like fabricate. The very best players can fabricate. And it's part of why players like I'm sure everyone has seen The Last Dance at this point, but like, did you watch The Last Dance?
Nope.
Okay. I get to explain this. This lights me up.
Good.
You probably saw Last Dance memes.
Probably.
Did you see the meme of Michael Jordan? And I took that personally.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That's that was the whole show. Like, obviously not the whole show, but literally like anything could happen. Like he was walking by someone in the hallway and he like didn't give him the proper respect. And he was like, I took that personally. Next time I played him, I made him pay for that. Like he found ways to feel slighted and pissed off so he could be motivated to crush them.
That's funny.
And it was just his way of getting in the zone.
He
just had to be pissed off about everything and just like,
okay.
And if you ever get the chance, go back and listen to his Hall of Fame speech.
Okay.
It's so funny. Because of how ruthlessly, like not intentionally, because of how ruthlessly competitive he is. It's like this 10 to 15 minute speech. And he's like, I just want to thank my high school coach who didn't want to start me. And I just want to thank, Byron Russell, who after I'd retired the first time, challenged me to like blah, blah, blah. And it's like 5 minutes of him be like, I want to thank this person who doubted me at some point in my career because you were wrong and I was right. And I haven't played for 5 years, but you know what? I could still probably play. Like I could come back. Like he's just so like, he's like daring people to motivate him again or something. It's
That's
cool.
funny.
T1 really quick. I want to talk about.
Yeah.
Actually you had something to say about this, about their undefeated run.
Yeah. So, this is not taken away from them. Same with the G2 one. Like, I'm not trying to say like they don't deserve the run, they don't deserve the spot. But people are talking about the undefeated T1 run. And as an esports boomer, and from what I could tell, about 20 to 30% of LCS viewers have also been watching about that long, maybe 40%.
Yeah.
Faker had an actual undefeated season where they didn't drop a single damn game. All right, they perfected the group stage and they 3-0'd every single best of 5 in the playoffs.
Okay,
that is not what this one was. So I mean, they didn't lose a single match.
What year was the undefeated season?
This was probably the 2015 on the road to Worlds, or it was like right after winning Worlds.
Really?
Yeah, I think like they won Worlds and then went home and then didn't drop a game. So it was
that wasn't LCK though.
Like
that was
it was Champions Korea 2016 spring, like something like that, or winter, something like that. I think they won their second Worlds.
14.
Okay, maybe it was they won their first Worlds and then did it.
Yeah.
But it was like, I think it was right after Worlds. That's what I remember it being.
Oh, why did I not remember this? Yeah. No, I think so. It would count as the winter season, I believe.
Probably, yeah.
I'm looking this up right now. So this is when the format was different though. It was when 16 teams are in there. It was Group A to Group D. They 3-0-0, which is a 6-0 game score, which is not as many games. Okay, that moves to playoffs. So I'll move to.
Yeah, and it was 3 straight BO5s, I want to say.
Then they 3-0'd Samsung Blue in quarters, 3-0'd KTB in semis, and 3-0'd Samsung Ozone in finals.
So it is only 15-0 in games, right? Which, fair. But, right, though that is against more elite competition because the first 6 are against whoever, and then the next ones are against other teams who were in the top half in the first place, in the top quarter, and the other finalists. So, like, it's a rather difficult 15-0, right? This isn't just like you won 2 round robins of the LCS, right? Because you're playing Sigma Team in Korea 3 times in that, right?
Yeah, so that was 15-0. This one's 18-0 match score, 36-7 game score, and then 3-0-3-1, which would move it to 42-8. Yeah. So more impressive, 15-0 or 42-8 is how you want to look at it. I
guess, right? Just because obviously, I I'm not even calling it more or less impressive. I'm just
Yeah.
saying that, like, hey, if I want to stipulate, undefeated means like I mean, just splitting hairs.
Okay.
Like they did not lose a match. Accurate. They are undefeated in matches. That is true. It is
Yeah.
an undefeated season through that lens. I just, historic undefeated season. They've had an actual lossless season, right? It's all I'm kind of saying there, right? Is like there's a different version of this that was even more impressive.
Yeah.
Now, hey, going 36-0, that's absurd. Right, like, and I'm not saying that's the challenge, but just like, hey, by the way, it's just like, hey, by the way, they did something that I would argue is more impressive before, because, right, like, how far above do you have to be, right? Like, let's say your chance to win every single game is 90-10.
Yeah.
You don't go 15-0 if your chance to win every game is 90-10, right? Like, it's gonna come up, not tails, but you're gonna roll a nat one, eventually, right? If your chance to win every single game is 85%, this is your score line. Right? This is where you end if you're 85%. If your win rate in Champions Korea 2015's winter is 85%, you're not 15-0, you're 14-4.
Yeah.
Right? Like, or 14-3, something like that. Which means doing the 15-0 instead means your chance at winning every individual game was actually 95%. You were that far above other teams that, like, you were a 95, 96, 97% win rate team that, okay, you didn't, roll your natural one, or maybe you really were something like that. But, like, no team's 100% win rate. Like, in across infinity, right? But like that means that their level of domination was even higher.
Yeah.
To me, right?
Right.
To never drop games, you had to be that far above everyone else.
I agree. And I'm surprised I wasn't more on top of this during the commentary, because people were like, in the first time in LCK history, we have an undefeated team, which is true because it wasn't called the LCK back then. But and it was shorter back then as well, because it went winter, spring, summer. They ran like a 3-split system.
Yeah.
And every other team in the league didn't get COVID back then.
Oh, yeah.
Which is like, it's like a minor thing. They were literally the only team who didn't lose a player to COVID at any point in the season.
For what it's worth, though, 3 of the players were, as far as I can tell from what I read, were sick with COVID during the final.
Yeah.
So, like,
but they claim they tested negative right before, which
right, sure.
I really hope that's true.
Weren't feeling well during it.
Yeah.
Like, weren't feeling well, tested negative, then some, I don't know. Like, again, I'm just repeating what I saw online, so grain of salt and all that, but
true. Wow.
Either way, still impressive, right? I'm not trying to take away that this wasn't dominant, right? T1 are my favorites heading at MSI. They are, to me, the best team in the world.
Listen, like, the storylines we got going in MSI, even with just Caps and Faker, is awesome. Like, we have Faker and the Zoomers coming in there with, because that's the interesting thing about Faker's run as well. Like, Faker's still amazing, but like they went undefeated because that team is cracked, right? Like,
that team is cracked.
Guma Keria is just like that bot lane skill is so absurdly high. So we got them going. We got Caps going on a 12-game win streak, right? Like, if you're really trying to build this up as like winningest European org ever, winningest LCK org ever, like best EU mid ever, which there's going to be a debate between, the European fans, but for this purpose of this, I'm going to say Caps. I'm not making a whole separate video tangent to argue about Caps perks and all the other EU mids. Yep. Faker, Caps. I really hope the LPL resumes. Rookie's still in there, right? If you got Faker, Caps, Rookie, Bjergsen,
woo!
Come on.
Or Fudge.
Yeah. Rookie, Fudge, same, basically the same. Fudge, Bjergsen. You never really know.
One of them's wider.
Yeah. That's something I'm looking forward to, but that's definitely a topic for another video. Do you have any final thoughts before we wrap up?
No, I'm just hyped. Like I'm excited to see who comes out, because I am glad I got my top 4 right. This is the top 4 that I called from the beginning of the split. This is my top 4.
Same.
I did say, and I was thinking about it before the Golden Guardian series started, I'm like, I called Cloud9 4th, by the way. I called Cloud9 4th at the start of the year. The other top 3, would have then been the other 3. Now, I don't know if I favor C9 EG. Like, that one's, I don't know, right? Because, EG looked a little wonky, and, Cloud9 kind of crushed Golden Guardians, but, also, I mean, quality of opponent, neither is that high. So, we'll have to wait and see. But, I'm almost right from preseason predictions.
Cool.
I called TSM no playoffs, and I called this top 4.
Yeah. I mean, that's half the league.
That's pretty good.
Good job.
Thanks.
Yeah. All right. And did you call? Yeah, we'll get to that in the future.
I didn't call the game scores.
We'll talk about MSI in the future. Okay. Thanks.
I did call T1 because it was like, oh, well, they're after the 3-0 undefeated or 4-0 undefeated match start. Yeah, it's them.
Yeah.
At least, I wasn't sure at all.
There is a lot of T1, G2, MSI content in the future of this show.
Yeah.
So stick around for that, everybody. I'm looking forward to it when we get into that part of the year. Okay, thanks once again for joining me, Phreak, and I'll see everybody next time.
Bye.